In the quiet corners of Indiana, nestled among rolling hills and whispering cornfields, stands a building that holds more stories than a library. It's an old orphanage, a place where childhoods were both lost and found. Today, I want to share one of those stories with you, the story of a little girl named Lily. Lily arrived on a crisp autumn day, her tiny hand clutching a worn-out teddy bear, the only relic from a life she barely remembered. She was just 5 years old, with eyes the color of the summer sky, but they held a storm of confusion and fear. The world she knew had vanished, replaced by long hallways, rows of identical beds, and the hushed whispers of other children who shared a similar fate. The first few weeks were a blur of unfamiliar faces and routines. Every morning, the clanging of a bell would wake them, a jarring start to a day dictated by schedules. Mealtimes were silent affairs, each child lost in their own thoughts, the clatter of spoons against bowls the only soundtrack. Lily would often stare out the window during these meals, watching birds fly freely in the sky, and she'd wonder if she'd ever feel that free. Loneliness was a heavy blanket in that place. At night, after the lights went out, the dormitory would fill with the soft sounds of quiet sobs. Lily would pull her own blanket up to her chin, hugging her teddy bear tight, pretending it was the warm embrace of a mother she couldn't recall. She learned to be invisible, to melt into the background, believing that if no one saw her, no one could hurt her. She spoke little, her voice a small, fragile thing she kept locked away. But even in the grayest of places, a sliver of light can find its way in. For Lily, that light was Mrs. Gable, one of the caretakers. She was an older woman with kind eyes and hands that were always busy mending clothes or tending to the small garden out back. Unlike the others who were often stern and overworked, Mrs. Gable saw the children, not as numbers, but as little souls in need of warmth. She noticed Lily's silence. One afternoon, she found Lily sitting alone under the big oak tree in the yard, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. Mrs. Gable sat down beside her, not saying a word at first. She simply sat, sharing the silence. Then she pulled a small, slightly bruised apple from her pocket and offered it to Lily. Lily hesitated, then slowly took it. It was a simple gesture, but for a child who felt she had nothing, it meant everything. From that day on, a quiet bond formed between them. Mrs. Gable would save the prettiest flowers from her garden for Lily. She'd read stories to her after the other children were asleep, her voice a gentle melody that chased away the nightmares. She taught Lily how to sew, her small fingers fumbling with the needle and thread, but slowly, surely, creating something of her own. For the first time, Lily felt seen. She started to speak again, her voice still quiet, but no longer filled with fear. She even smiled, a rare and beautiful sight that made Mrs. Gable's own eyes light up. But life in an orphanage is a series of goodbyes. Couples would come, looking for a child to complete their family. Each time a car pulled up the long gravel driveway, a wave of hope and anxiety would wash over the children. They would be lined up, dressed in their best, slightly too big clothes, their faces scrubbed clean. It was a strange parade of hope and heartbreak. Lily watched many of her friends leave, a mix of happiness for them and a deepening ache in her own heart. She wondered if her turn would ever come. One sunny spring morning, a car different from the others arrived. A young couple stepped out, their faces filled with a nervous sort of hope. They were the Millers. They walked through the halls, their eyes scanning the faces of the children. But it was Lily they stopped for. They saw her in the garden, helping Mrs. Gable with the tulips. They didn't see an orphan. They saw a little girl with sky-blue eyes and a quiet strength. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings and paperwork. Lily was scared. Leaving the orphanage meant leaving the only home she knew, and it meant leaving Mrs. Gable. On the day she was to leave, Mrs. Gable hugged her tight. "Be brave, my little Lily," she whispered, tucking a small, hand-sewn pouch into her pocket. "And never forget how brightly you can bloom." Inside the pouch was a single, perfect seed from the garden. Driving away with the Millers, Lily looked back at the old brick building, at Mrs. Gable waving until they were just a speck on the horizon. Tears streamed down her face, but they were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of a new beginning. Lily's story didn't end there. It truly began. She planted that seed in her new backyard, and as it grew, so did she. She learned what it felt like to be tucked into bed at night, to be called daughter, to have a home that was truly hers. The silence that once defined her was replaced with laughter. The story of the Indiana Orphanage is the story of many Lilies. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a single act of kindness can plant a seed of hope, and that every child deserves a place to bloom. Thank you for listening. If you were moved by this story, please consider sharing it. We'll see you in the next one.